We are live. Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. Joining me today is Katherine Esposito. Kat.
Hello.
Uh, Kat is one of the other therapists that work at Effective Artistry with me and with Caitlin, who is typically here but won't be here today. Uh, this is not therapy hour. We are Kat and I are both therapists, but this is not therapy for very, very, very many reasons. An important one is that this is online and it's public, and so it's just an open conversation. Kat and I are going to be talking, and because we're talking in this format, we're keeping in mind that other people theoretically are here watching. Some of you might be here participating in the chat, which we always enjoy and appreciate. Um, but like any conversation, we just influence each other, right? Like whatever I say, you're hearing and responding to. What you say, I'm hearing and responding to. And that includes those of you who participate by putting stuff in the chat. We read that and we respond. We'll start by talking about some topic, but it doesn't need to stay on that topic. It rarely does. So those of you who are watching, feel free to put in whatever you'd like in the chat, regardless of whether you think it might be related to what we're already talking about or not. We work at a group practice called Effective Artistry, uh, which our office is located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do group, individual, and couples therapy. We also work with a couple of executive functioning coaches who can work with people all over the world. For therapy, we work with people in the state of Illinois, remote or in person. And I always try to remember like the whole spiel to do at the beginning. I know you've watched a few of these, Kat, but this is your first time joining us, yeah?
Yeah, good to be here. I probably watched maybe a dozen or more of you and Caitlin and Marie, and I always enjoy them. Good stuff.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's good to be here today.
Glad to have you here. It's exciting to have you here for the first time. I want to get everybody at the practice to come on sooner or later, but you know, understandably, people can be hesitant about going on a live stream. So I appreciate you being so brave and willing.
My
Um,
pleasure.
I obviously, for anybody who like typically watches this, I'm in a different spot than I usually am. I'm fortunate enough to be at my in-laws' lake house in Wisconsin, but I was traveling the last 2 Mondays and we had to cancel, and I didn't want to cancel a third Monday in a row, so be here. Uh,
It
that's why the
looks
background's different.
absolutely gorgeous behind you. Wisconsin. That's where we got married in the woods. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I'm jealous, but yeah, it looks beautiful. I'm sure I would have my coffee out there. Did you already do that?
Oh yeah. I don't wager. I drink tea, but yeah, I've been
Are
having
you?
my tea up here in the morning, and
Mm.
yeah, it was kind of like rainy earlier, but it's beautiful now. Really, that's all. I'm just doing this to make everybody jealous of where I'm at. That's all.
Well,
Uh,
succeeded.
no, it's gorgeous. Yeah, you might occasionally, my kids and their cousins and everyone is down at the beach, so you might occasionally hear a child scream or laughter or whatever, play scream. There are adults with them. I don't want to mention the children, but
Okay, that's good.
uh, anyway, yeah. So this is an open conversation, and we were talking a bit before we came on, and Kat, you were mentioning that you've been thinking about somatic therapy, but also I'll just throw it generally to you. What's on your mind, or what have you been thinking about? What do you want to talk about?
Um, well, besides somatic therapy, one thing just kind of off topic, but about therapy. Out of my clients, I have one client that has a dog and about six who have cats, and maybe or several, and myself included, four cats. And I'm just wondering, is that a thing? Like, is there something going on there? And also, do you notice that too? Like cats in the background? I know all of my clients' cats' names, and there's the little fluffy butt and all that. And the majority of my clients have cats. So just wondering if you
Yeah.
experience that with yours.
No, that is a pattern I've noticed, and I have some
Really?
theories about it. I like it. I like it when people. So there's a lot of times where I'll like say something or ask a question, and people will be like, "How do you know that?" or whatever. And it seems like it's magic when it really is just like noticing patterns that people don't typically notice, and so once you notice it, it becomes obvious.
Hmm.
Pets and cats in particular are some of those things. So I like when people notice these patterns and correlations. Like it doesn't seem like I can't figure out why it would be correlated, but it does seem to be correlated.
It does to
Uh,
me.
yeah. So some of the theories. Number one with cats. So people talk about like different sensitivities, but typically people mostly focus on auditory sensitivity. But you can be sensitive, hypersensitive, meaning you take in a lot of data, or hyposensitive, meaning you don't take in much
Hmm.
to anything. And one very common one is like tactile and a particular vibration. So there's some science behind this stuff we can get into if you're curious. But one of the things that I seem to notice about cat owners is they tend to be people who are sensitive to tactile data and or vibration as self-soothing or like stims or regulating techniques or whatever. Yeah, in particular, I always ask people like, you like that thing where they sit on your chest and like nuzzle their head against your chin and you pet them and because
Pet
yeah, there's the like pressure right on your sternum. They're purring, so they vibrate right there.
Yeah.
That's important, that vibration right in that area.
Uh-huh.
Plus the tactile, like the softness of the fur, but the hardness of like the spine underneath it.
Mhm.
It's just a very like sensorially thing. So some other things that would correlate with this, if someone has a particular sensitivity to vibration and to touch and uses that as like stimming, whatever, is people who do things like skateboard or rollerblade or anything where like it involves a lot of like vibration. As you're skateboarding, it like bounces, or that they really love to listen to music, especially listening to music that's quite loud or very heavy on the bass that vibrates, as well as being people who like to talk and sing and chant and like just have kind of like humming all the time, verbal. All these things correlate, it seems to me. So it's one of the theories of mine.
Mhm. That makes sense. And cats are more calming. You have a dog. I love dogs too, but like dogs pretty much are more like jumping on you and wagging tail and causing a commotion more. So
More
maybe,
difficult to predict, yeah.
yeah,
They move faster and more unexpectedly than cats tend to.
yeah. That is a great. That's your theory.
Well, that's one, yeah. Another one is that pets and other things can take this role too, but pets do it better than anything else. Is you get some of the benefits of socializing with humans at a lower cost. Like, for example, there are inherent benefits to having something else outside of you which has its own like whims and whatever, so you can't fully predict it, but that does rely on you. It's people will talk about like it gets me out of the house or it gets me up in the morning. People will do this with plants sometimes too, house plants, that it's like it's nice to have like I get up in the morning and water my plants.
Yeah.
There's an intrinsic benefit to having something outside of you that you're not in complete control of, but that does rely on you and that you get to help in a reliable way.
Yeah.
But pets are much lower stakes and much less complicated than like other human beings. They're also much easier to like if you decide you want a pet, it's easier to go get one than if you decide you want
A child.
a roommate or a child or a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for that purpose, cats, dogs, like any kind of pet can meet that part of it. Um, but the like taking care of them, the actual like things you need to do are lower physically demanding tasks for cats than for dogs. Especially when you have people who are, burnt out or tired or have various types of disabilities or whatever, feeling overwhelmed, yada yada. Cats tend to be the direction they'll go because you can have that relationship, that other person without being like, man, I have to take them out twice a day, even in the middle of winter. And
Yeah.
is
Is that your kids
you
in back?
hearing kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn my air conditioning off because it's so loud. But yes, I heard them having a blast.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, other theories. We also think there's some cultural stuff to it, right? Like there's an idea of being a cat person or being a dog person, and that idea exists for a reason. Not I think because it's some like definitely true like observable characteristic of a person, but because like anything else, hang out with a bunch of people who all love cats, you're more likely to love cats. You hang out with a bunch of people who all love dogs, you're more likely to love dogs. So there do tend to be like cultural, certain subcultures for like another. Now I should say this is all anecdotal. I'm not like referencing like research data here, just my own experience and what people say and what you see around, whatever. But I think there are other correlations, like people who are big into anime tend to be people who are more into cats than dogs. You know, like
There are more cats in anime, right? That's like the whole like Hello Kitty thing and all that, or like Japanese thing, right? Is that an
yeah,
anime?
I don't. I mean, certainly there's a lot. Yeah, Hello Kitty is a Jap. I don't know if it's anime is like a particular kind of animation, and I don't know if I don't know much about Hello Kitty. You might have it.
Oh, I thought you would with all
Um,
your boys. So I'm just kidding. I know a lot
yeah.
about it, but okay. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, it could be some of that. Right. Certainly. I mean, cats and dogs both have place in anime, but a lot of it is like cultural. You know, like people who like hunting are more likely to be dog people than cat people, right? And sometimes there are some intrinsic reasons for those correlations. Like in hunting, there are dogs that you can utilize in hunting. There are
Pointer.
plenty of people who like hunting and like dogs, and they don't have dogs that they use in their hunting. You know, so a lot of it's just
Yeah.
if you live in a city, there's reasons that having a cat is easier and therefore more likely than having a dog. And one of the reasons that in research it's always important people talk about correlation is not causation is because a lot of the time two different things both correlate to some other third thing that they don't directly interact with each other necessarily, but that they each so like the one again anecdotal, this is not my own theory, it's one that people put out there, is that like politically speaking people who are more on the right, the further to the right you go, the more likely you're going to have dog people, and the further to the left the more likely you're going to have cat people. And there could be lots of things with that. But one of those is like a lot easier to have dogs when you live in an area with a lot more space or a yard or, you know, like more area to run around.
Yeah.
And a lot easier to have cats when you live in an apartment building in a city, and living in a city versus living in an open space correlates with it. So I don't
Yep.
think there's something intrinsically about cats or dogs that leads to one side of the political spectrum, but they correlate to some other thing.
Yeah. Yep.
But it is interesting for sure.
All makes sense. Yep. And I have a client with several birds too. So I have the sessions. They are still HIPAA, but I compliant. But I have a
Yeah.
session. She has one or
I
two
well
birds on her
well
shoulder.
uh yeah. Um I do think there seems to be some correlation with, again, anecdotal, but there seems to be some correlation with people who identify as being neurodivergent and people who have pets. Uh, and particularly people who will be like very into their pets. It's
Mhm.
like have one around, but like,
Yeah.
but one of the things I was referring to, like some of the benefits about interacting with other people, one of those things is that humans are very responsive to the emotional state of other humans. They're like, if I'm chill and happy, whatever, and you come in and you're pissed off, that I'll very quickly start to move in that direction of being pissed off with you. And same vice versa. If I'm all pissed off and you come in and you're happy, then I might move in the direction of calming down and feeling happier, right? There's a lot that goes into which person kind of moves more in the other person's direction, but generally like we have this pull. It's hard to be like this comes up in couples counseling a lot, that if one person's escalating a conflict and the other person doesn't escalate, it's hard for somebody to like keep escalating more. But if you build on each other, then it goes
Yeah.
all over the place. But one of the things that can be super helpful about pets is they can be chill. Cats,
Mhm.
I think, especially even more than dogs, but they're like you can be all angry or anxious or sad, and then here's your cat just chilling, just being a little cat,
Yeah.
and it puts a pull on your emotions to chill you out.
Yeah.
It also is like they like you, and it's very helpful to have when, especially when you're feeling badly about yourself, very helpful to have somebody or something else that's like, nah, you're awesome. Like
Yeah,
the fact that my cat loves me makes me not like stress as much about myself and
someone
whatever.
loves me. And with cats, especially, the whole, they're a little bit more aloof. Dogs are pretty much going to love and pant and wag their tails at anyone or everyone, but cats takes a little bit of work. And when they do love you and come purr in your lap or, rub their cheeks on you, it does feel a little bit more rewarding, I guess. But anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that
Yeah.
tangent. Another one,
No,
real
no,
quick.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, historically, in general, I have read that I think this is a fact that like musicians and writers historically have had cats. They love cats. And of course, there are writers and artists who had dogs too, but majority speaking, artists,
Yeah,
Hemingway, Van Gogh. Wish I had some more right off the top of my head, but yeah, cat people.
yeah.
It's
It's
interesting.
there's no correlation is like one to one that like every time that someone is a musician, they have a cat or whatever. It's just tendencies and whatever. But one of those tendencies is the more dedicated you are to like sedentary activities, things where you're sitting in your house doing stuff, which
That
includes
makes
if you're a
sense.
writer, you're sitting in your house writing. If you're a musician, you're sitting in your house composing or practicing music, then the more likely you're going to
Animal.
go with cats who hang out around the house, where dogs disrupt that, right? Like if I'm in the zone writing
Hemingway.
something and then it's time to take my dog out for a walk, it's time to take my dog out for a walk. I gotta like stop and go do that. Whereas a cat's more flexible, like, nah, if I'm in the zone, I can just do this and not have to worry about the cat, right?
I can write with my cat in my lap.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mentioned earlier the vibration thing. So the nervous system, maybe this has something to do with the somatic stuff that you were talking about, but there's the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems that kind of I don't have a complex enough understanding to talk about all this in like great detail. So I'm just giving the simplified versions that I know, which is the things that kind of like turn on and turn off fight or flight is like a very oversimplified way of talking about it. You enter into that mode and come out of that mode. And the vagus nerve is like the main trunk nerve or the system that helps you to come out of fight or flight.
Hmm.
So there's research behind the idea that stimulating the vagus nerve, which goes like from the base of the brain down through the center line of
The trunk.
branching into a bunch of stuff,
I didn't know
that
that.
stimulating the vagus nerve helps you to regulate and come out of fight or flight, and that in particular vibration helps to stimulate the vagus nerve and helps to regulate. So vibration in this area, of course it's internal, right? But like in this area, there's reason to believe that that's a universal or close to universal like soothing thing.
Mm.
And so anything including like music involves a lot of vibration, particularly playing, if you're talking about instruments, particularly playing guitar, which like touches the body at this point and vibrates,
Yeah.
drums, but really anything.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So it's not.
Especially artists who tend
Yeah.
to like, we get in our head the point, in order to be an artist, you have to be dealing with things in the cognitive realm a lot, which can be upsetting or sad or exciting, and therefore makes it more important to have things that help you.
Hmm. Yeah. It's good stuff. I've talked to my clients about it. I have 7 other clients who have cats and only one with a dog, and
Yeah.
everyone has their theories, and that is something that we've talked about too. But you went more in depth, and I will definitely tell my clients about this convo.
Yeah,
I
my theory about, and I'm sure other people have this theory too. I'm not trying to claim that I just am not, it's not something I've read, so I don't want to say it's like something that's generally thought. My theory about the vibration is that it's about speech, communication, that like typically when like historically for our species evolution wise, when we're in like dangerous situations, you're quiet. And it's only when you're in a safe place that you're like talking and communicating with other people.
Mhm.
Because the vibration helps stimulate, and it could be cats, and it could be music, and it can be skateboarding, and it could be a massage chair, it could be all kinds of things. But the most effective is internally generated vibration. which comes from speaking, using your voice, speaking, singing, humming.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I actually genuinely think it's one of the things that makes therapy so helpful for people is just the simple act of like using your voice is in and of itself regulating, regardless of what you say or what the other person's saying. It's one of the reasons that when people are their most upset, I'll say like talking to somebody else if you can, right? Like you don't always have the option. It's not always safe, but that's why we always want it to be an option to be safe. It's because you're upset, you talk, you feel better. Pretty much invariably.
That's your always your advice to me. Several times now in supervision, our 2-hour supervisions on Wednesdays, especially before I had my own therapist, you can see it, whatever it was pent up, and I was not talking to anyone, not my husband. I didn't want to burden them or my friends. And Brandon, your response several times has been, how's that working out for you?
It's one
And
of
it's
my
been
favorites.
great.
Whenever people are like, I've been trying to do this, I think this is the way to solve it. How's it been working? If it works, great. If it doesn't, let's look at something else.
Nah.
It's,
So,
honestly, it's one of the most, I think, common problems in our culture is that many people are taught that the more you're struggling, the less you could talk to somebody else. Whether that's like you don't want to burden them, whether that's like don't talk while you're upset, there's a lot in our culture and our language that tells people like your job is to get yourself regulated, then communicate with other people, not become regulated through communicating with other people. And that's nonsense. It's terrible. It makes everything worse for everybody.
yeah.
Generally, emotional things, cognitive things, like problems that you're experiencing, don't get better when you're on your own. They generally get worse on your own and get better when you're interacting with other people.
I can attest to that. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Anyway, yeah, fun little theories. That's one of the things I love about being a therapist is, we've talked about that cognitive miser theory that the brain doesn't spend resources without a reason, which includes noticing stuff, right? Like I, until this very moment where I started thinking of it, I wasn't noticing how many pictures are on the wall behind you or the plants back there or whatever, right? Because my brain was saying like, other things are more worth noticing, and we can only notice so much right now. Right? One of the things that I love about being a therapist is that it makes so many, like pretty much any information about humans relevant, right? Because there are things like hobbies, for example, that I personally don't enjoy or find interesting, but it's still useful for me to notice and learn information and remember information about those things because other people are interested in them. So I'll learn about things from clients, or I'll remember things to share with clients, or just like theoretically, right? Like what you just did talking about this pattern you noticing about the cats. Like it's worth us noticing in part at least because maybe there's something there that can help us to do our job. But
Yeah.
being a therapist is amazing because literally any information I get exposed to is interesting information.
Mm. Like, are there any
Makes me
specific oh, go ahead.
no good.
Are there any specific examples of, like, for example, I know you are a gamer, correct? Board
Yeah,
games, right? If I were your
yeah.
therapist, I would look into at least one or two of the games, and then I would, make a reference, and then obviously it would be a joke, but it'd be a little fun connection. I would do it, just a little.
Well, what I tend to do more is one of two things. Either you just ask the person about it, learn about it from them,
Hmm.
not independently from them, and then show them your knowledge, right? So like if you were my therapist, rather than going and learning about games, you just ask me about games because A, that's much more efficient for you rather than having to spend additional time to go look things up. B, anything you learn from me is bound to be relevant to me. Whereas if you learn something through other channels, it might be references to things that I don't know about. Maybe I do different kinds of games than the ones you end up learning about or whatever. And C, it's useful for both of us, for me as the client and for you as my therapist, to have an interaction where I'm sharing with you, like you're genuinely curious about stuff that I like and that I know, and I get to share that stuff with you and like give you some language that you haven't gotten
No,
elsewhere.
100%. I would ask you, well, what kind of games are you into? Because I think I know. I think you've talked about them, but no. Then I would go and look up a couple of terms just to throw out and get a laugh out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
even
first,
then, that which is fine. I
yeah.
hope what I'm saying doesn't come across as criticism. That's fine. But I don't do that because I don't. I mean, like I said, it's not as efficient. I got other things to be doing with my time than coming up with, researching the things that a client likes when I can just learn about it from them. But the other thing I was referring to, so one is about learning things from clients. The other is like there's a term in psychology called latent learning, which just refers to learning like how you acquire information without deliberately attempting to.
Mhm.
Meaning, if I were to ask you right now to draw out a map of your neighborhood, you could do that, even though you haven't like studied a map of your neighborhood to memorize it or whatever. Just as you go about your life day to day, you pick up information and you learn stuff. Whatever. That's called latent learning. But that's the other way is that like just as I go about my life, I'm not making a particular effort to look into a certain kind of a thing, but when I hear this thing, somebody shares a piece of information, or I see a reference to something on a show or whatever,
Mhm.
I'm more likely to. It's like if you imagine going on a hike and picking up like little pebbles that you find interesting. If you're only picking up pebbles for yourself, then whatever pebbles you find interesting, you'll pick up and you'll carry it with you and whatever. But if you're picking that you think someone might find interesting, like
Mhm.
either you or your spouse, well, now there's more that you're noticing and picking up. And if you open it up to like me, my friends or family or my clients, whatever. And there's all kinds of pebbles that I'm picking up and carrying with me, information I'm learning and remembering where like I myself wouldn't have been interested in it, except to know like, oh, you know what? Someone else might be interested in it. It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, overwhelming. It's not all upside, right? Like the more you notice of one thing, the less you notice of every other thing. So I pick up a lot of information that might be of interest to people, and I miss a lot of other stuff that isn't information that might be of interest to people.
Mm. Yeah. Never thought about it that way. Huh.
We have a commenter said it helps when your clients start saying things like, "I have 0 spell slots today, and I failed my con save," which are both references to Dungeons and Dragons, talking about what you were talking about, using that kind of language.
Oh, can you repeat that? I don't see it in the chat and I didn't hear it. What was the
Oh, you know what? I should have told you this. The chat you're selected on is probably the private chat between you and I. That's the one it defaults to. So on the side there, if you click on comments at the top,
Oh,
then
okay.
you'll see the comments.
Oh, it helps when your client starts saying things like, I have 0 spell slots today and I failed my con save. Exactly. So this is what I
Yep.
would have done, Best on Insider. I would have asked you, what kind of games are you into? Oh, cool. Where did you get that? Okay, cool. And then I would have came back at you with some, oh, I had 0 spell slots today. Or I would have said, I'm a total
Yeah.
noob and I have no idea what you're talking about. So,
Well,
yeah.
so
Oh, that's
in terms of therapy, not just therapy, but communication generally, but to me, therapy is very specialized communication. Um, this is what I talk about as acquiring language. Whenever somebody uses language that you are not familiar with or uses it in a way that you don't know exactly what they mean by it, or uses it in a way where like you think you know what they mean by it and then later it turns out that you interpreted it differently. Those are things that indicate to you, okay, this person has some language or uses some language to mean some things that I'm not aware of, and so I want to learn those things. So whenever a client's saying something that I am not familiar with, what is that? What's a spell slot? What's a con save? Like, help me understand that stuff. And once I acquire that language, then yeah, I'm going to use it back. If so, in this case, if someone's saying I have 0 spell slots today, which I'm just going to kind of assume means like I'm out of energy, I'm out of resources, kind of things, right? A
a
lot
lot
of D&D players I know. Go ahead.
a lot of D&D players I know use D&D metaphors for mental health and life stuff all the time. Like, what's an
Yeah.
example, like a metaphor that they use?
Well, that's a great question, and while because there's a slide to the stream, so while we wait for a response, and you don't have to respond, but while we wait, so that 0 spell slots is an example, right? Where in the game in Dungeons and Dragons, people who cast spells, who use magic, have a limited number of resources called spell slots that they use to cast them. And when you use them, you're out until you rest and regain them.
Okay.
So that's one where that's D&D language used to mean like I'm out of resources, like I'm done for the day. I got nothing left in me. I gotta just rest and I'll hit it again tomorrow.
Love it. That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah,
What's
and
my
it's
con save? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
con save is a reference. Con is short for Constitution. In Dungeons and Dragons, characters have 6 main attributes: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. They
Okay.
have like different values. Some have more or less, whatever.
Yep.
And certain things will happen in a game when somebody's trying to harm you or influence you or whatever, that will prompt a save, which means you roll the dice and see like did you resist that thing or not. So con save is short for Constitution saving throw. A saving throw where I get to add so the more Constitution I have, the tougher and healthier I am, the bigger my bonus is, and therefore the more likely I am to resist this thing.
And that is applied in life to stuff coming at you, bam, like right, blocking the.
It could mean a lot of things, like it could be something like getting sick, for example. I could say I failed my con save because I got sick. I could say I failed my con save as like I've run out of endurance, whatever. And that's why it matters more about learning how the other person is using it and what they mean rather than learning like the general broad thing, because kind of like an example I use for this all the time is depressed or depression. But of course, many people that we work with will say, I'm depressed, struggling with depression. And they'll say, what does that mean? What do you mean depressed? And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes people will be like, you're a therapist, you don't know what depression. Like, of course I know what the word means, but I don't care about what it means generally or according to the dictionary. I care about what you are trying to communicate to me. So much more important to me than like learning all these words from the dictionary or in some other resource is just acquiring your specific language.
I
Some
love
other
that.
comments. You had asked about some metaphors and they put some in there.
I'll read them. Okay, like I have 5 levels of exhaustion, meaning my speed is reduced to 0, and I'm 1 bad night's sleep away from dead. She rolled a nat. Hold on. Nat? She rolled a nat 1 on her charisma check for that one. I don't think I got that one right.
Yeah, nat is short for natural here. A nat 1. So in D&D, the main dice that you use for most things is a 20-sided dice. It has 20, numbers 1 through 20, referred to as a D20. And
Okay.
rolling a 1 on that is rolling a natural 1. Rolling a 20 is rolling a natural 20 shorthand. 1 or nat 20. And a 20 is a critical success. Like, you rocked that thing. And a 1 is a terrible like failure. You really messed up.
Okay.
So saying she rolled a nat 1 on her charisma check means in this case something like she was trying to like make a joke or do something social, like be charismatic in some way, and totally messed it up and it didn't go well.
Fell flat or something, meaning if someone was trying to persuade someone about it, backfired hard. I love this. I think I'm getting this, and I am definitely going to use this 0 spell slots today and failed my con save. I'm going to use all of these, and I'm going to say it probably when I'm having a bad day, and it's going to make me laugh. And I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. I swear to God. So
yeah. No, they just added another thing there of if you rolled a nat 1, no matter how good you are at it, it went very badly. So in the game, you have bonuses to your rolls based on things about your character. One of the pieces of like context about a nat 1 is even if you are brilliant at this thing, even brilliant people screw up badly sometimes. So I just heard a cry that was definitely my youngest son. So that called, like, I'm mostly not hearing the noises back there. An example of cognitive miser and like attentional sorting and whatever. Mostly not noticing the noises. But then there was a cry, and it was a cry that my processes identified as like, that's your youngest, that's Rex. And so I noticed that. Kind of like when you're at a restaurant and there's all kinds of conversations going on around you, but then if the person at the table behind you keeps being like, Catherine this and Catherine and you're like, what the, like you notice your own name. Anyway, yeah, that's one of the pieces of context that is useful for some people is that like if you say, oh, you rolled on that one, it could be a way of saying like, hey, I generally think you're pretty good at this, but you just had an unlucky time. But it could not mean that also. And this is why it's all about learning an individual person's
Yeah,
language.
for sure.
The people used
Zero
to,
spell slots. Zero spell slots is a very useful metaphor, as in, I'm out of energy today. I'm just not having a great day. I'm out of patience, type of thing. That's correct because I'm about to
yeah.
put down. I'll
So
use it. I love it.
talking about spell slots in this way is very similar to talking about spoons in spoon theory. There are some differences. Earlier, there was that comment from Bast Insider about a lot of D&D players I know use D&D metaphors for mental health and life stuff all the time, which, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can sub out D&D players with any specialized group of people, and it's still true, right? Like people that like to hunt like people that like to hunt will use a lot of hunting metaphors for mental health and life stuff all the time. People, computer programmers will use computer terms and, like athletes will use athletic metaphors for things all the time. And some of these things then seep into the more like broad usage. So like a lot of our sayings are idioms that started out as someone making a reference to something that's like relevant to their life and is a part of the language they use day to day, and then kind of
Yeah.
escalating, spreading from there.
Yep. Well,
So
this is great, and I love it. And I wrote
yeah,
it
it's
down.
awesome.
It's just something to like make myself laugh because I don't know anything about D&D. But one of my oldest friends worked at Blizzard Entertainment, and she was into still is into D&D. And I've watched a game or two. It was a long time. I was just like, wow, this is a long game. But anyway, so I picked up a couple of terms like noob and stuff. But now I have this one. So, and it makes you laugh,
Well,
right? For someone who,
sure.
yeah, it gets you out of your funk
It's
for a little bit.
it can. I mean,
Yeah.
again, like anything, right? Like for people who enjoy it, it's enjoyable. For other people, if you said do it, they'd be like you just said, right? Like this is really long. Like there are times that I've
Creative.
kind of the same of like my brother-in-law. I'm at the lake house, right? My brother-in-law loves sailing. He's a big sailing guy, and so when he gets to be up here, he wants to be out there sailing. I don't get it, right? Like it's not like I think it's unenjoyable or whatever, but it's like it's fine. So if you were to say to him like, "Hey, you can go sailing for 5 hours," he'd be super excited and love it, and it would pull him out of a funk and all these different things. If you told me that I could go sailing for 5 hours, I'd be like, "No, thank you. I don't want to do that." Like if I had to go sailing for 5 hours, I'd be like, "Really? I have to do that? Like I don't want to do that." So
Maybe an hour or two. I would love to be on the water.
maybe,
Okay.
but like I don't want to be on a skateboard at all. If I step on a skateboard, I'm probably going to fall and hurt myself immediately, or I don't know why that. I guess I'm in the woods. Like I don't want to go hunting at all. I don't want to go fishing at all. Like not even for a minute. Everyone has their own stuff. And so one of the reasons that like learning a person's language is useful in neurolinguistic programming, they they talk about like they approach it from the lens of talking about something that somebody is interested in makes them hear and care more about what you're saying, which is true. Uh, like for example, you have 4 cats, you like cats. If we're having a conversation and I say something like, how like when your cat is walking all over your keyboard or whatever, like you're much more likely to hear that and it's meaningful because it relates to your experience, not because I'm like using some trick, but just because I'm referencing the language that's in your mind.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, you talking using gamer language to someone who's a big gamer, using neurodiversity language to someone who is neurodivergent, using whatever language with whatever person. But
Mm-hmm.
that's why the first thing is always learning theirs,
Yeah.
because then you can use it. Acquiring language,
Questions.
co-constructing language, then utilizing language. Those are you want to learn theirs, you want to build language together, you want to teach them some of yours.
Mhm.
Yeah, calling it
Absolutely.
spell slots both helps make it feels like it's a mechanical problem that's not entirely your fault, and kind of makes it feel a little more silly. At least this is the comment I'm reading. At least it does make me smile a little to say it instead of I have no energy left.
Calling
For
it
sure.
spell helps make you feel like you're
Also, some connotations. So,
oh,
like, this is a metaphor I have used.
exactly.
Fast Insider comes here to the stream quite a lot, which I absolutely love. I very much appreciate your presence here and in the comments. So some of this is references to things we've discussed in the past. Like I could be wrong about this, but I believe that spell slots is a reference to like me having put out the idea of using that terminology in that way. Uh, would never suggest that to someone who doesn't already play D&D, because then I'm just teaching them some language, and if I'm going to teach them some language, I probably would use some other language. But if it's language that they already have that I can utilize, in the same way that arts, I love it. Because of these additional, like, you can never fully replicate the context. So one of the reasons I like spell slots as a metaphor for people who play Dungeons and Dragons more than spoons, for example, is because there are different levels of spells. There's 1 through 9, and each progressively higher level you can do a much more powerful spell, but you also have much fewer of those spell slots, and you have to be much more experienced to even have access to them at all. So being able to talk about like this is a task that is going to take like a level 8 spell slot is a useful concept, including even things like you can level up spells and cantrips. Yeah, I skipped cantrips are ones because they don't have spell slots. You can use them unlimited. Uh, Although they used to be called 0 level spells, but not in 5th edition. Um, anyway, like you can never artificially replicate something authentic
I was
in
literally
all the
about
connections.
to say something about that. This last comment. I was literally when I can still clean the litter box when I'm out of spell slots because it's a cantrip. Okay. I was just thinking to myself, I haven't gotten to my 3 litter boxes today for my 4 cats, and I was about to say, yeah, it's gonna be about a 7 spell slot today for me personally. So anyway, that's great.
Yeah,
This
well,
you're awesome. That's
cantrips, meaning
exactly
things you can do forever, unlimited. Yeah,
I'm gonna use
and
it all.
that opens up other conversations, right? Then we can talk with somebody about like if someone's saying like, "Oh, I hate it. I get home from work and I just like and scroll social media when I want to be doing, you know, making my art or whatever." If we've developed this language because it's language that they use and I've acquired, then we can talk about, well, look, scrolling social media is a cantrip. You can do it even when you have no spell slots left, where working on your art takes spell slots.
Mm-hmm.
Where at the root of it, what we're talking about is resource management and energy management and like how your workday is draining you, whatever. But using that language makes it a lot more accessible. When I'm talking with people who are big into computers and computer programming, I'll reference like when I'm talking about working memory, I'll talk about RAM. When I'm talking about long-term memory, I'll talk about hard drive. You know, I'll use terms like inputs and outputs more when I'm talking with someone who
Makes sense too.
is super into like Marvel. I will reference Marvel characters as ways to like make certain points or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this is part of what I'm talking about. I get to talk about like any random interest or hobby or whatever. Like the amount of clients I've worked with over the years who are super into weather patterns or who are super into politics and follow like elections all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and the conversations that that leads to and how we can reference them. Because in
That's
therapy, what we're always trying to get around to sooner or later is like making things relevant to this person's experience, making their life better, you know, happier, more suited to them.
yeah. Yep.
And people, it's hard to talk about that. Part of why people have such a hard time coming to therapy, even when they want to. I mean, like not necessarily like, are hesitant, but like even when you're very into it, when you start therapy, it can be intimidating and people don't know what to say and they're like, I don't know, you help me, you're the expert, whatever. Part of that is because they feel like it's this whole realm that they know nothing about, you know, but they have to sit and learn from us. But it can be super useful to talk about like, well, what do you care about? What do you know? What do you like? When we use that, like, see, you already know this, right? Like someone who's super into politics, for example, as a hobby, and it wants to talk about social anxiety and worrying that people are misinterpreting them. Well, we can talk about influence and speech and politics and propaganda and messaging and all these things that people understand in that context and say, yeah, it's the same stuff.
Yep.
It's different language, right?
Yep.
Like I don't understand why I'm not working on my art at night and instead I scroll social media. And then a person feels like, oh, what is it about me? What do I not understand that I need to learn? We say, no, no, you do understand. People have limited resources. You just understand it through the lens of spell slots. So we take the thing you already know and just say, yeah, that's also relevant to the thing you're dealing with. We're just making connections because nobody knows anybody, like any individual person's life and experience better than that person. They get stuck in this idea of I'm struggling because I don't understand things, when really it's I don't know how to connect the things I understand to my life in ways that result in what I want in certain narrow ways, right? Like everyone understands most of the stuff. Anyway,
Yeah, this all kind of ties in to executive functioning training that we are doing each week, and talking about it in different ways helps, like hearing it put a different way, because I want to learn it and understand it, and apply it really bad in my own life, and then with clients who are looking for that type of help, like assistance to utilize too. So uh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a great. I appreciate you putting that example out there because it's a great example of a thing where what happens is I'm struggling with a thing, right? Let's say something common and simple like doing the dishes at night or cleaning up the kitchen or whatever, right? Struggling with this thing. And over the course of my life, as I continue to struggle with it, I'll come up with different ways of thinking about it. Oh, this is just me being lazy. Oh, this is because kitchen stuff's gross. Oh, this is like I'm annoyed because my roommate should be helping out more and it's not fair for me to have to do whatever, whatever. But all these ways of thinking about it, some eventually theoretically, like one of those ways works. If I think about it as being lazy, then I can get myself to do it and great. But if it doesn't work and then I think of another different way and it doesn't work, eventually I'll come around to, in this case, oh, this is an executive functioning issue, which is very helpful because now it's a new lens for me to look at. I can ignore the fact that all that other stuff I've been trying hasn't worked because now I understand it's an executive functioning issue. But when I think about it that way, that also then identify part of why it brings me hope of like, oh, I can still resolve this thing is because it's intrinsically like, oh, this is something I don't know much about. This is a new thing I haven't thought about or learned much about. That's why the idea is hopeful to me that if I learn about this, I can do it. So by the time someone's looking for executive functioning support, what they're saying is, A, I've identified that some of the things that I'm struggling with in my life are executive functioning issues. And B, I don't understand executive functioning well enough, but if I do understand it better, then I'll be able to change those things in my life. So they show up expecting like, teach me about executive functioning, and then I'll be able to do all this stuff. And obviously, I think there's value in executive functioning work, or I wouldn't do it. But it's not generally about saying like, this is what executive functioning is, because understanding a particular like the kinds of things that get identified as executive functioning issues are typically things that understanding is not the solution.
Right.
Like if you're struggling to do your dishes, the problem is that there are dishes that need to be done. No way of understanding the problem is going to change that. Like think, know, and understand whatever you want. There's still dishes. Knowing stuff doesn't change those. So certain, just like anything, when people have success with a particular tactic, they go back to that tactic more and more. So people who, for whatever reason, their careers, their lives, whatever, people who have a lot of success in their life through learning and understanding information, people who have jobs that tend to be focused on like the things that they think and know, people who enjoy reading and getting information for fun, whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have a tendency then to be like, okay, any new problem. I just need more information about it. You know, but then every once in a while, there's problems that no matter what information you get, it's not going to change it. So executive functioning to me is a very particularly fun thing to work on, even though it's really frustrating for people generally to work on it because generally people just want to learn about what the concepts are and what the words mean with the idea that that will solve the problem, but it doesn't work. It's kind of like the equivalent of thinking that if you learn a lot about anatomy and like physics and whatever, that your muscles will get really big because you understand how they work and how they like it helps, but then you also have to do stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, mostly just the idea over and over that like stuff is complicated. Anybody who ever pretends like anything is simple, we're just doing that for convenience, right? Like nothing's actually simple. Even when we say something like, oh, we'll take a simple problem like doing your dishes at night. It's not actually simple.
It's not?
There's untold variables, right? Like simple is a thing that refers to how we're framing something, right? Like I'm I'm framing it as a simple problem, do the dishes. But what it means for you to do the dishes, completely different things. Our lives are different. Our dishes are different. Our kitchens are different. And even what it means for me to do the dishes one night versus the next night is completely different. There are unlimited variables that impact that process. But we can just pretend that it's simple for ease of communication and say effectively what we're saying is like, we're only going to talk about this in a simple way. It doesn't mean that the thing itself actually is simple.
I do
One of
that. No, I was just saying I do that. Yeah, sure. It takes mental and physical resources, really mostly mental. But I kind of hard on myself. For example, maybe it's the dishes, but and I tell myself like, girl, just walk the 7 feet, do the dishes. You'll be finished in 5 minutes. It's simple. And in
yeah.
some ways it is, depending on the person and how they frame it. So I don't think it's me being hard on myself. I think it's me just saying, let's
Well,
go. Like,
in that case, those you're talking about two different things. One is being hard on yourself or not, what you are being hard on yourself.
it's
Because in this
realistic.
case, when you're saying like it's simple, it'll only take 5 minutes, what you're saying is like, come on, this is so easy. What's wrong with you? Like, just do it.
It. Yeah.
So something that I think is helpful is simple and complex. The way that I use those words, the way that I think these words are generally used, uh, is a reference to how much it takes to cognitively understand the task. It, so, for example, pushing a car up a hill is a very, excuse me, is a very simple task. It is not difficult to cognitively understand it. You just push it. That doesn't mean it's easy. So
Yeah.
something can be very simple and still be very difficult. So difficult, easy, and difficult is about how many resources does a task require, where simple and complex is about how many resources does it require to understand how to do the task.
What was the last
It's
one? Yeah. So pushing the car, I
simple and
know what
complex.
that means. That's simple, but there's it
Right.
weighs 1,000 pounds or whatever, so it's not, and it's almost impossible. But
Well, it's simple but difficult. So easy to difficult is how many resources will it take to do the task? Simple to complex is how many resources will it take to understand how the task is done?
yeah, so there's
Then there's a
three.
whole separate cat. So simple complex is a subset of easy to difficult. There's doing the task, you have to know how to do the task,
Hmm.
and then you have to do the task. And knowing how to do the task is the simple to complex part. It
Hmm.
leaves out the like, because yeah, it is really simple when you're being hard on yourself, right? When you're like, it's simple, just go over there and turn on the faucet and scrub the dishes, right? You do understand how to do it, but then there's the actual doing it part. That's part of why the spell slots thing is useful to someone who plays D&D, because in the rules of D&D, it's very clear when you're out of spell slots, there's no way to get them back except for like resting, right? So if you think of it that way, then you wouldn't, it's so simple, just do it. You'd be like, yeah, it's simple. I know how to do it. I know the spell. I know how to cast the spell. I do it all the time, but I don't have the spell slot available to do it right now until I rest. So it shifts from, instead of like, come on, just do it. It's like, okay, if I want to do it, then I have to rest in order to recover enough to be able to do it. So these little things shift, and I love it. But the more helpful you are to somebody, or the more you appear to someone to be successful in various ways, the more they assume that you understand everything, because everyone in our culture thinks that understanding is the root of all success. You know, like everyone who's successful understands stuff. It was nonsense.
Mm.
So it's part of why I try to put so much of an emphasis on this. Isn't like, knowing stuff and understanding stuff is helpful to some extent. It is not the be all end all, and you can be very happy and very successful and still not really know or understand stuff, even if it seems like you do.
I want to know. I want to be just keep on acquiring more knowledge. Like you know a bunch
Oh
of
yeah,
stuff. I want to be at your level with. I mean, I know a lot of stuff that you don't know about, but just in general, like
exactly.
life is it's just
I
yeah,
think
much
one
to
of the most effective ways to think about it, and this is just a way of thinking, right? There's not a way to like actually measure this, but to me, I think everyone acquires the exact same amount of information at the exact same rate. So the only way that one person could have more information, like in total, than another is just because they're older. They've had more time to do it. But otherwise, and that having more information doesn't mean you come to better conclusions, or more, effective or whatever. But it does mean you have more information. So yeah, whatever things I know that you don't, there are an equal number of things that you know that I don't. It's just that we're talking about stuff that where the stuff that I know more about the stuff that we're talking about than you do. But if we were to talk about the other things, we'd be talking about stuff where you know more than I do. And I'm with you. I also am what I was saying about being a therapist. I just want to acquire, I love learning information.
yeah.
But that's not because it's inherently, or I don't have any belief that that means like it's inherently the best thing to spend your time doing. It's just what I like, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not inherently better than what somebody else likes if they like to spend their time, I don't know, building a model train set, or building houses, or growing a garden, or whatever. Like whatever people like to do is, it's not that my thing that I enjoy is better than their thing that they enjoy.
Of course.
Although the thing that I enjoy, acquiring information, does tend to get put on a pedestal in our culture. Our culture thinks like, oh, if you know a lot of stuff, that's a lot more important than having a beautiful garden. I don't think that's intrinsically true.
No, me neither.
That makes sense. It's just to each their own. This is just, I'm a nerd. Like any nerd, like I'm obsessed with the things I'm obsessed with. And to be obsessed with stuff about the human experience and language and communication. But yeah, I can't tell you how to play cricket. I don't know. I know some of the words, but I don't know the game. I can't tell you how to play any no one of the many, many sports that exist in this world that I don't even know exist, right? Like we're just we're in a stream having a conversation that I set up about stuff that I think is interesting. Of course I have more information about stuff that I'm the one who's like, let's talk about this stuff that I find interesting.
Yeah.
If I went on a knitting podcast, I'd be like, tell me, I want to learn because I don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Anyway,
Podcast, somatic therapy podcast, and I don't know the tip of the iceberg now. And I'm gonna continue to listen to this gal, and maybe I'll come back at you guys in like a couple more supervisions, and we'll talk about that, like because it's
yeah.
relevant to a client. But yeah,
Yeah, that's the key to me, is not to take pride in what you know, but to take pride in how much you like acquiring new information, so that when there's something you don't know, it doesn't wound your pride to be like, I don't know. It stokes your curiosity of like, oh, this is something I don't know about. I want to learn.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, I gotta get going. But it was good to be here with you, Kat, and with you, Bass Insider, and with all the rest of you.
I know there's a
Uh,
thing where you throw up chunks of grass so people go during the break and tamp the grass back down. You don't mean actually throw up chunks of
in
grass, like, well, I didn't think so.
I think they're referring to cricket. There must
Yeah.
be something in, because I referenced cricket. There must be something in cricket where people like throw grass up into the air. Yes, I don't know.
Sounds like a
I know what
blast.
know what a wicket is, and I know, anyway. It's hard to reference when you're trying to point out that there's things you don't know. You can't reference anything that you actually don't know, because how would you reference it when you don't know it exists?
Mm.
So it's hard to pick things where you're like, I don't know a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff, including, by the way, this isn't all just about like academic topics. If someone was like, "Oh, you know my mom?" Like, no, I don't know your mom, and you do, and like a lot of the information you have that I don't isn't about like an academic topic. It's about your life and the people in it and your experiences. You have memories that I don't have. You know people I don't know, right? Like, and to say that yours is less important than mine is not true, unless we're talking about in regards to a specific thing. Like, if we're trying to build a model train set, then yeah, having information about how to build a model train set is more important than having information about your friend, but only because it's in the context of that task.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Anyway, well, hey, do you
I'm
guys
really
want to
going.
start a maybe an effective artistry pickleball team? And then B, thank you guys for like Bastan Insider talking about the spell slots, because I'm gonna go clean my 3 litter boxes right now, and I think it was gonna be about a 7. And after talking to you guys, it's like a 1. I got this, and
Well, that's
thank you.
great. Just know that once you're done, it took that spell slot and you don't get it back. It took something from you. It cost you something to do it until tomorrow, until you rest. Anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
good to be with you.
Good to be
Thanks,
with
Kat,
you.
for joining. So happy for you to be here. And
Thanks
thank
for
you
having
guys
me.
for watching.
All right. See you tomorrow. Bye.